Walk into a British pub in the 1950s, 60s, or 70s, and the first thing you notice isn't the beer, it's the order. Not written rules, not signs on the wall. A social system, quiet, strict, and instantly understood by the people who belonged there. Because the old British pub wasn't just a place to drink. It was a local institution, a living room for the neighbourhood, a notice board without the internet, a place where money, reputation, and routine met every night. And to an outsider, it could feel confusing. Where do you stand? Who gets served first? Do you sit down or order at the bar? Why is everyone so calm, but also watching everything? So today, we're stepping back into the pub culture of the 1950s to the 1970s and breaking down the real rules people followed. Not fancy etiquette, real working rules that kept the place running. And once you understand them, you understand something bigger about Britain itself. You open the door. The warmth hits first, that mix of heater warmth, bodies and old carpet. Then the smell, beer, smoke, wood, fried food in the background, damp coats drying, a faint chemical note from cleaning. Now look around. The pub isn't designed like a modern bar with vibes. It's practical, a long counter, a few rooms or sections, regulars in familiar spots, a quiet sense that everyone knows where they belong. And that brings us to rule number 1. 1. The pub belongs to the locals first. In the old days, especially in smaller towns and tight neighbourhoods, the pub was a community's territory, not in an aggressive way, but in a real way. Regulars had their corner, their stool, their routine, their time. If you were new, you weren't automatically unwelcome, but you were noticed, and your behaviour mattered, because a pub ran on reputation. If you were respectful, you became one of us. If you were loud, rude, or acted like the place existed to entertain you, you stayed an outsider. So the first rule was simple. Don't arrive like you own it. Arrive like you're being allowed in. 2. You order at the bar and you don't queue like a supermarket. This is where many people got confused, even back then. In a British pub, you didn't always form a neat, straight queue. You gathered at the bar, and the bar staff kept a mental map of who arrived when. So the rule wasn't stand behind someone. The rule was wait your turn and trust the system. But there was a skill to it. You didn't hide in the back and hope to be served. You didn't shove to the front either. You stood where you could be seen, made eye contact at the right moment, and waited calmly. If you pushed in, regulars would remember. If you complained too loudly, you'd look inexperienced. The right behaviour was quiet patience. 3. Never snap your fingers, wave money, or shout. This was a fast way to become that person. In old pub culture, calling the staff like you were in charge was rude. You didn't click fingers. You didn't shout, "Oi!" You didn't wave cash in their face. You waited. And when you got served, you kept it simple, which brings us to another rule. 4. Know what you want. Before you reach the moment in a busy pub, hesitation was a crime. Because the pub was built around flow, so people knew their drink, knew their pint, knew the order, especially if they were buying for others. You didn't stand at the bar and start a long discussion about options. You said it quickly. 2 pints of bitter, half of mild, gin and tonic, lager and lime, fast, clear, no drama. 5. The round system. If you're in, you take your turn. This is one of the biggest cultural rules, and the one that shaped friendships. In many groups, people bought drinks in rounds. One person buys for everyone. Next time, another person does. The point wasn't just convenience, it was trust, because rounds only work when everyone plays fair, and the old pub had a strong sense of fairness. So here's the rule. If you join the group, you don't mysteriously disappear when it's your turn to buy, and you don't order something ridiculous on someone else's round, which leads to another rule. 6. Don't take advantage. Order roughly in the same class of drink. In the 1950s to 70s, pub choices existed, but they weren't endless luxury menus. If everyone is drinking pints, you don't suddenly demand the most expensive spirit situation available. You match the group. It wasn't written, but it was real. You didn't embarrass the buyer. You didn't create resentment. You kept the round honest. 7. The public bar and the lounge weren't the same world. Older pubs often had different areas, sometimes even physically separated. A public bar could be more basic, more working class, sometimes louder. A lounge could feel more respectable, sometimes with softer seating or a slightly different atmosphere, and people made choices based on identity, habit, and comfort. So a rule existed, even if it wasn't stated. Pick the right space for your group. Certain people sat in certain places. Not always, not everywhere, but the pattern existed. And if you walked into the wrong side of the pub, you could feel it. Not because someone attacked you, because the room went slightly quiet. 8. Regulars had their seat, and you didn't steal it casually. Some regulars sat in the same spot so often it became theirs by tradition. If you didn't know, you might sit there innocently, but if you did know, you avoided it, because the pub ran on unspoken agreements. You didn't mess with someone's routine unless you wanted a quiet war. 9. Bar staff were judges. Treat them with respect. The landlord or landlady and the bar staff weren't just serving drinks. They managed behaviour. They decided whether you were welcome. They decided if you'd had enough. They could cut you off. They could throw you out. And in old pub culture, their authority mattered. So the rule was, be polite to bar staff, not fake polite, normal polite. Please? Thanks? A nod. No drama. If you were respectful, you got served smoothly. If you caused trouble, your night ended quickly. 10. You didn't bring your problems in and dump them on strangers. This one is subtle. Old pub culture had a strong tradition of emotional control in public. Yes, people complained. Yes, people moaned about work. Yes, people talked politics. But there was still a line. You didn't make the whole pub your personal therapy session. You didn't cry loudly at the bar. You didn't start shouting your private life at full volume. The pub wasn't built for that kind of openness. It was built for companionship and routine, with boundaries. 11. The pub was a local news network before social media. Pubs carried information. Who got a job? Who got married? Who moved away? Who was sick? Who was in trouble? People learned things by being present, which meant your behaviour wasn't only your business. Your behaviour became a story, so a rule existed. Don't act in a way that will follow you home, because in a local pub, it could. 12. If there's a darts match or dominoes game, respect it. Many pubs had games with real social weight. Darts, dominoes, cards, sometimes pool. If a game night was happening, it wasn't just entertainment, it was tradition. You didn't interrupt a match. You didn't bump the dart player. You didn't shout during throws. You didn't mess with the scoreboard. And if you did, you looked like someone who didn't understand the place. 13. Smoking was everywhere, and you didn't make a scene about it. In this era, smoking was normal in pubs, so the atmosphere had a haze. Clothes smelled of smoke. Ceilings and walls absorbed it over time. You might hate it, but in that period, you didn't walk into a pub and demand the air change for you. The social expectation was different. 14. Last orders was real, and closing time was a ritual. In old pub culture, time mattered. Pubs had regulated hours, and last orders wasn't a polite suggestion. It was a moment, a call, a signal that the night was closing. People would rush a final drink, finish conversations, and accept that the pub had an ending. And that created a cultural rhythm modern nightlife sometimes lacks. The night stops, you go home, You don't stay out endlessly. 15. Don't get too loud too early. Pace yourself. The old pub wasn't always about getting drunk fast. For many people, it was a few pints after work, a steady rhythm, conversation, and then home. So a big rule was, don't become chaotic before the room is ready for chaos. If you turned up already shouting, you'd stand out. And standing out in a local pub wasn't a flex. 16. If someone wants to be left alone, leave them alone. Not every pub visit was social. Some men, especially in certain eras, came in to sit quietly with a pint and a newspaper, or simply to exist around people without talking much. There was a respect for that. You didn't force conversation. You didn't interrogate. You read the room. 17. Talking to strangers was normal, but it had rules. Yes, you could talk to strangers at the bar, but you didn't do it like a modern influencer. You did it gently. A comment about the weather, a joke about the match, a small remark about the day. If the other person responded, conversation grew. If they didn't, you backed off. That's a classic British style. Offer a door. Don't push someone through it. 18. Don't disrespect the local culture. Football, work, and identity mattered. In many pubs, football loyalty mattered. Local industry mattered. Area identity mattered. So you learned quickly. Don't insult the local team. Don't mock people's work. Don't act superior, because the pub was a place where pride lived. 19. Paying was simple. Cash, quick, no fuss, no splitting bills across 5 apps. You paid at the bar. Cash changed hands. The process was fast, and that speed kept the pub moving. 20. The deepest rule. The pub was a social contract. Here's the core rule behind all the others. The old British pub worked because everyone agreed, quietly, to keep it working. You waited your turn. You didn't ruin the atmosphere. You respected the staff. You didn't take advantage of rounds. You didn't make strangers miserable. You didn't treat it like a stage. Because the pub wasn't just a business. It was a shared space that belonged to the community. And communities only feel comfortable when most people follow the same unwritten code. So when people say, pubs aren't what they used to be, they don't only mean beer brands or decor. They mean the system, the order, the rhythm, the social rules that turned a room full of strangers into a place that felt familiar. And here's the final truth. Those old rules weren't about being posh. They were about reducing friction. They were a way for ordinary people, tired from work, cold from the weather, stressed from life, to share a space without constant conflict. That's why the old pub mattered. It wasn't just where people drank, it was where people belonged.